Okay, thank you. Um, so today's topic from Covey is success strategies is habit 5. He explained last week. Uh, by the way, I guess I should say again that towards the end of the student presentation, there was a lot of noise out here. Um, Please try to control your noise when people are presenting, whether it's me or a student group. Anyway, habit 5. Is, of course, seek first to understand, then to be understood. And Dr. Covey explained last week in one of the videos that um, the three parts, or the three habits that relate to interpersonal success do correlate. That habit 4, think win-win, is kind of the goal. Or at least you might say the philosophy, I guess. And habit 5 is kind of the method, is how to communicate with people better. And habit 6, synergize, is the result. And so it's important to kind of keep that in mind. So it's kind of the philosophy, the method, and the results. So today we're talking about the method, and that can be quite important. In fact, very, very important. Because, again, that's how you get where you want to go, the method. So how we learn to communicate with people can make all the difference. Like, when Ed finally put his foot down with his wife, communicating is very important. I just... to review we're going to try to watch at least 4 of these videos, maybe 5 of these videos in today's, during the class, and then the rest will be on your own. There's some of them you might feel not real relevant, so let me just make a sales pitch for the sales videos. First off, we're all salespeople. You need to understand that. And some of you may actually be professional salespeople and you don't know that yet. Most people, there's very few people who actually go to college thinking they're going to be a salesperson, because it's kind of intimidating. It's kind of, you feel a little bit uncomfortable about selling to people. But as I said, it might be that you're going to go there whether you know it or not. And actually, sales are one of the primary ways that you can get rich if you learn to be good at it. That's how my brother got rich, is that he's good at sales. I mentioned he's good at interpersonal relations. And so basically that's it. So he can sell, he's very, he's got a good sense of humor. People like to be around him. And so they buy insurance from him. And that insurance, his ability to sell insurance has made him extremely wealthy. Now, there's some business savvy in that too. He first off was a salesperson for somebody else and got really good at it then, and then he bought his own company. And so he had to have good business savvy as well, so he became very good at marketing and advertising, along with his skills in sales. But ultimately, even if when you ask somebody to be your spouse, that could be a sales job. When you sell yourself to get a new job, that's a sales job. Some of the things that are taught by Keith Rosen could be helpful to you in other situations. I never, ever, ever thought I would be a salesperson. I am introvert, which means I'm kind of awkward sometimes in a social setting, a little bit shy. I can sit in my office all day with my computer and be totally happy. But when I bought my first newspaper, it totally depended on my ability to sell, which I had never had any training in sales. I didn't take any classes in sales. So I had to figure out how to sell on my own, and I was able to do it successfully. I was able to double the newspaper's revenues in 1 year, sell it for a nice profit, and that was perhaps one of the most important things in my career. But I did not expect to be a salesperson. So some of you may become that, whether you know it or not. Especially if you become an entrepreneur, definitely, you'll end up probably having to learn how to sell. Because entrepreneurs, almost by definition, have to sell something in order to succeed. So while it may not seem real pertinent to you, they're short. They're try to figure out how to apply it to your own life. They're all really short. 1, 2, 3, 4. Like they're all average. Like an average is 2 minutes each. And he does a good job of explaining. He's a good presenter. Let's go ahead and go straight to one of Covey's videos and watch that. So a lot of his examples here originally were in a family situation. Which situation do you think is harder to really relate empathetically, to listen, and to interact empathetically? Do you think it's harder in a family situation or in a business situation? You think family? Because I think I don't know, but perhaps it's especially as a parent, or I get whatever that family relationship is. We're kind of used to in the family giving our opinion without listening. We think we understand each other. Maybe that's part of the problem. We think we understand each other, and yet something serious come up, and we immediately jump in with our opinions, and we don't really listen. I think there's a lot of divorces in the world because people don't listen. There's a lot of fractured relationships between parents and children because nobody listening. That example where he said, the father said, "I don't understand my son. He won't listen to me." And that was kind of, that illustrates it. The father didn't even, he repeated it several times. The father still didn't get it. He still didn't understand. What's wrong with what I said? Why do you keep repeating what I said? He just did not get it. So for example, let's take another example. You're a parent now. Your child comes in and he says, "I am so disgusted with school. I'm going to drop out. I'm going to go become a mechanic or something. I hate school. I just hate it." So what's your reaction? Typical parent is, "Are you crazy? You'll be nothing if you don't go to school and get your education. That's the stupidest thing I ever heard." And obviously the son's shield goes up, and he's ready to fight and defend himself. Whereas if he comes in and says the same thing, and then you say, "What's going on? Explain what's happening. Why are you so discouraged?" And let the son explain it to you and ask some additional questions. And then maybe, as you proceed, maybe some of the questions get to, do you think if you drop out of school, that you're going to accomplish your goals? Will you be able to support your family? What are your long-term goals? Will dropping out of school get you there? Let them talk about that. And maybe they do have a way so it will work. But the worst thing you can do is just jump in and start giving opinions. And if you actually let that person explain everything he's feeling, and you ask them questions to get them talking about consequences, talking about plans. What are your plans, and what would you do if you drop out of school? What's your plan? Do you have someplace you want to work? Develop those skills? Can you make enough money with that? Just ask questions. Let them think it through. Let them talk it through. And what you'll find, he says, and I totally believe it is true, is at some point, once the son has talked it through, has expressed all of his feelings, all of his frustrations, all of his ideas, all of his plans, he'll say, "Dad or Mom, what do you think?" If he hasn't already figured it out himself. If you ask enough questions, he may not really have to even ask that. He may realize, I can't get what I want by dropping out of school, can I? I mean, just so sometimes just the questions will lead that person to the right answer. But if not, at least he will feel understood, and he will want then, what do you think I should do? And maybe then you still don't push your agenda onto them. For example, well, what do you think are the alternative? What are some alternatives? Maybe we can talk this through and think about all the alternatives to what you could do. Do you really want to be a mechanic, or you just want to do something? You just want out of school. Is it specifically mechanics, or what are some other options that you might pursue, and how would you get there? Maybe we need to look into some of this stuff. Maybe you don't have the answer, and you admit you don't have the answer. Is there some sort of a trade? Some schools have some vocational training. Some school districts in America anyway, and I think a lot of other places too. So you look at the alternatives and let them be part of coming up with their own solution, but don't dictate to them what they need to do, or they will not buy into it and they will resist it. But the main thing they want is to be understood. That's the first and foremost thing. The example I gave it last with the real estate thing, it's very, very similar, but it's just easier. I agree that it is easier in business to do this because you're usually talking to a peer, so it's adult to adult. You don't know what they're after when you're negotiating with them. And so it makes sense for you to ask questions of them to find out what their needs are, what their expectations are. So it is actually easier in a business situation, but it's essential, and we still don't do it. When we get into, if you watch some of these sales videos this week, you'll see that the sales trainer is very much into understanding where people are coming from. That you need to also seek to understand before you can sell something to somebody. If you're really going to be good and you're going to be a good salesman, the first thing you need to do is understand them, not have them understand you. So it's the same principle. You need to understand their situation so you can help them solve their problem. Now that may end up in a sale, and you may make some money from it. But if you seek just to go sell them something, and you don't care whether it fits in their budget, you don't care how it fits into their lifestyle, you don't care, you're just going for the sale, then you're not going to be successful in the long term, and it's going to be a very rough process for you to make a living as a salesperson. You have to learn to listen there also. So he mentioned in there, you might pay attention to this. There's 5 levels of listening: ignoring, pretending, selective listening, attentive listening. But of course, he says the most important is empathetic listening, to where you don't just hear the words, you feel the feelings. He was talking about an interpreter. It's not really this relevant, but I remember I have a friend who's the best interpreter I've ever been around. So when I was in Kazakhstan, we frequently had to talk to groups in Russian. My Russian's not very good, but this friend of mine was the best interpreter I've ever seen, and she really did express your feelings, not just your words. So much so that one time, this couple had been in Kazakhstan to kind of like a service mission. They were trying to do good things, to work with NGOs and stuff, non-government organizations. And anyway, they were leaving then, and the wife in the couple was saying how much she enjoyed being there and the friendship she had built there. And then she started crying, and so the interpreter expressed what she said, and she started crying, and everybody started laughing because the interpreter was so precise in her empathetic translations that she was crying too. But anyway, just strange. But a couple of examples he gives. He made reference to it here, but let me kind of to kind of expand on it, he suggests that we need to be like a doctor. Have you ever had a doctor, you go in and you're sniffling a little bit? You have, it seems like you might have a cold, but he doesn't even ask you what your other symptoms are. He just says, "Oh, you just have a cold," and here, I'll give you the prescription. Bye. He didn't ask for any other symptoms. Didn't know if you had headaches. Did not know if you had nausea, anything like that. So sometimes in our interaction, we're kind of like that doctor who doesn't bother to listen. I had a doctor in America who not only would listen, he had a Wi-Fi system set up into a central computer. So he'd go in with his keyboard and he'd talk to me for a half an hour. Every time I met with him, he'd talk to me at least a half an hour and go over everything. And everything's going into his computer system. Do you think I liked having a doctor that actually wanted to know what was all my, everything about me? Of course I did. I did because I want him to actually, when he gives me advice, know what advice to give me. I want to be well. And so if I have a problem, I want him to understand my problem. So I've also had doctors just the opposite, that hardly ask any questions and they prescribe something without, I feel like they don't understand anything. And so if you're dealing with a professional, you want them to be like a good doctor who asks questions, who understands, and what he says, they diagnose before they prescribe. So a doctor prescribes medicine. They tell you what to take and what to solve your problem. But if they don't take the time to diagnose, they can't prescribe properly. So diagnose before you prescribe. And diagnose requires listening, requires asking questions. It requires knowing all the symptoms for a good doctor. The other aspect, another kind of example he gives is kind of in contrast to some of the other positive thinking. If you go to see an eye doctor and he puts up an eye chart, to see how you're seeing, and you stumble around, you can't see it very well, and his response is, "Well, just try harder. Try harder. I know you can do it. Come on. You're being lazy. Try harder." I mean, that's kind of the equivalent sometimes of when, say, we are talking to like a parent talking to a child. We tell them to try harder. We don't really understand that they're in a position like, try harder to see an eye chart. You can't do it. Trying harder doesn't allow you to see better when you're looking at an eye chart. And yet, sometimes when we're talking to somebody, especially in a highly emotional situation, in a family, something like that, we do the equivalent of that. We say, "You're just not trying hard enough." But they can't see the eye chart, in a sense. And that's a kind of a metaphor. So we need to make sure we understand before we diagnose. It's not a matter of trying harder, and it's not a matter of me giving you my glasses. We need you to get your own glasses and get your own solution. So again, I guess that was a slide that was supposed to remind me to talk about that. But yeah, don't diagnose before. You do have to diagnose before you prescribe. You need to understand deeply in order to be a good doctor, so to speak. Whether it's in employee relations, family relations, business relations, negotiations, whatever it is, it's the same principle. You need to understand before you can come up with a solution, come up with a proposal, come up with a diagnosis, whatever you want to call it. Kind of silly, doesn't relate a whole lot. Just point to where it hurts. It hurts here. Ow. It hurts there. It hurts here. Oh, you have a broken finger. Anyway, so it's sometimes it's not what we think it is. You can read those on your own. Okay, let's look at this other video. In fact, I think I'll probably see watch a couple of videos here, and we'll talk about both. This one is kind of a conclusion to this part, to Covey. So we'll watch this, and then I'm going to watch another one to get into another topic. So in this case, Clayton Christensen used the idea of disruptive innovation, but he does a lot of business consulting, and marketing is one of them. How do you expand your market? You have to understand the market, and one way he looks at it is this idea of what's the job that's being done. So it's not the traits of the milkshake, but why did you buy that milkshake? What is your ultimate motivation for buying that milkshake? In this case, he found in this location in America that half the milkshakes were being bought by commuters, people that had to drive a long distance to their work, or perhaps had a job that required them to drive their car to different places. And so they wanted something that would take quite a while, a lot longer than eating a banana, not as messy as eating a donut, not as guilt-ridden as eating a Snickers bar, but something that lasts a long time, that they would enjoy and keep them kind of awake while they're driving 30, 45, an hour, whatever it takes to get to their job or do what they're doing. And so the job was basically to fill that time, fill that hour of driving, and not just have to sit there and think about the traffic, do something. So once they understood that, he explains in a different video that they more than doubled the sales of milkshakes because they understood what the job was that was being done. They said that people who bought a milkshake later in the day had a totally different reason, that they weren't the same people and didn't have the same motivation. But where they really made the gains was in the morning, because nobody ever done a study as to why people would buy a milkshake at 6:30 in the morning. Basically, nobody understood that, and they figured it out. There is a way to use win-win and to use the both habits 4 and 5 in the business. Let me just give you an idea, and then we'll quit. When I bought my first newspaper, I mentioned I was able to double its revenue in one year, and that was one of the most important things in my career, was doing that, because that then funded my ability to go back and get my master's degree. I was able to buy a house. I was able to do some things that I would not have otherwise been able to do, and it also made me more marketable, because now I was not just a journalist. I was now a publisher who had been able to demonstrate that I knew how to run a business. In fact, later on in my career, I was publishing a group of newspapers, and some people were thinking about buying the group. I didn't own them, but I was publishing them. I was a publisher and editor, and another chain of newspapers came in, and they looked at our books, and they did a study to see whether they want to buy it. And they took me to lunch, and they said, "Ken, the newspapers themselves are not a great deal. They're okay. We will buy them if you agree to stay as publisher and editor. If you don't, we won't, because they're not a good deal, but you are. Because we can find in our chain of newspapers, we can find people who are journalists, and we can find people who are advertising salesmen. What we cannot find are people who have experience doing both." And so because of my experience, first when I bought my own newspaper, and then I was as publisher of this group of newspapers, I demonstrated that I could do both. And suddenly my value was much higher than if I'd just been a journalist or just been an ad salesman. Now I could wear, and I was wearing at that time, 2 hats, so to speak, and doing both. When I bought my own newspaper, going back to that real quick, I may have told you this before, but I reiterate real quick. I felt like it was a small community, and I felt like people were buying ads from me to do me a favor. I felt like a charity. I felt like I was going out begging for money, basically. I was a beggar. Please buy advertising from me. I'm going to die. And it was kind of humiliating, and it also was not very lucrative. And so I had to try to understand things from their perspective. And I also had to understand advertising better. And as I read and learned more about advertising, I learned that the idea of buying one ad does not work. That to be good in marketing, you have to learn to run a campaign for advertising or PR. You have to run a campaign, just like a politician would. Even if you're a little business, you have to think in the terms of campaign, because it takes more than one ad exposure to make a decision. And so if you don't run advertising consistently, people will not make a decision on your behalf, even if they're really good ads. And so yes, you have to have high quality ads, but you also have to make that connection enough times that they feel familiar with you. They feel like, oh, you must be a pretty good business because we see you advertising all the time. So I guess we can trust you. I was thinking about buying insurance. Let's say it's my brother, but I have an insurance policy. I have to think about it a little bit. So you see the ad one time, you're thinking about it, and now you misplaced the ad. You threw the paper away or whatever. So you need to see it again so you can remember, oh, there's the phone number I can call now. Now that I've had a chance to think about it, I can call them now. But it takes a while to come to a decision. And so most advertisers in that community that I was at did not know how to run a campaign. So I looked at it from a professional perspective. They need to understand how to do advertising better. And from their perspective, we need results. We need results or you are a charity. And so the two actually came together. They needed results to justify their advertising, but they didn't know how to do it. And so I decided I had to give them incentive to run a campaign. So it was a weekly newspaper, and a lot of them were running 1/8 page ads. The norm that I had to do running like a 1/8 page ad in a broadsheet newspaper, and they run it like maybe once a month, maybe twice a month, but they weren't running it every week. And so my goal was, from my perspective, was to get them to sign a contract that would have them buying paying me that much money every week. And so what I did was I gave them a package to make them think campaign. So I said, if you pay me every week for a 1/8 page ad, this is what I'll give you. 4 times a year, I'm going to give you a full page. You don't have to pay any more. You pay me for a 1/8 page ad, but I'm going to give you 4 times a year. 4 times a year, I'm going to give you a full page. Think about what you can do with that. And 4 times a year, I'm going to give you a half page. Think about what you can do with that. And 4 times a year, I'm going to give you a 1/4 page ad. And the rest of the week, you're just going to go 1/8 page ad, plus 4 times you get a streamer across the bottom, and you get 3 classified ads, basically. You want to have classified ads and things like help, have a bunch in the little small print. So I said, I will give you all of this, and all you do is pay every week for a 1/8 page ad. Now, once they saw this and thought about it, they started thinking like a campaigner. What can I do if I bought this package? Could I improve my business? And it wasn't too hard to sell them on the idea that, yes, you could improve your business if you did this, because this is a campaign. They began to envision what they could do, and this is what allowed me to double my advertising sales. So this is very much a win-win situation too. One of the reasons why I offered this is that I realized that the main cost to me was not paper and ink. The main cost to me was my labor. I only had 24 hours a day, and I was working really hard. And I was wasting a lot of time having to resell advertising to the same people over and over again because they weren't convinced they needed it. Whereas this, once they signed a contract, they had to take an ad out with me every week. I was going to charge them every week whether they took one out or not. So once they signed the contract, I now saved the labor of having to sell them again. Now they sold themselves for a whole year. So I saved my time, and now I became a consultant. I could help them understand how to do better with their advertising. And this whole campaign idea was made it better for them also. But I could give them suggestions. And so I know I transformed myself for as many people as I could sell this contract from a salesperson to a consultant. And they did a lot better, and the newspaper did a lot better. And other people also began seeing that things were changing. And so somewhat intuitively, they sold themselves on campaigning with me. So I went into the big city that's about 30 miles away, and suddenly the car dealers wanted to buy advertising from me. But they weren't buying this package now. But now they were willing to negotiate with me. So now they wanted to negotiate a good price to buy 2 pages a week, 2 full pages a week. They had never had the car dealers buying that sort of advertising from them. But they did buy it from me because they understood I was somebody who was willing to kind of wheel and deal a little bit and to negotiate a win-win situation. And again, I knew the paper and ink was not very expensive. That was not what I paid. My budget did not include a lot of money for paper and ink. It included the most expensive thing was me, my time. I only had so much time, and I had to write the stories, I had to lay out the paper, I had to do the darkroom work, I had to sell the ads, I had to produce the ads, and I only had those 24 hours a day. The more time I could save from that, the more I could get done, the more ads I could sell. I could go now sell to new advertisers that had never bought ads with us before because I had more time now. So this is just an example. There's the whole technique set up called the Mandeville diagnostic interviewing technique of sales. And this is for larger ticket items. Specifically, they made this for consultants. Specifically for engineering and architectural consultants. That's the type of corporation I worked for as a marketing director. And so it's basically just simply you go in and ask questions. And I don't have time to go through all this, but you can kind of glance at it. But you become the doctor. You take the perspective, you are the doctor, you go in and find out what their problems are, and then you do not, in this case, you do not give them a diagnosis. You tell them, you go through, I think we understand what you need, and you reiterate it, make sure that you understand everything. They say, okay, what we want to do, we want to take it back to our team. And we're going to have a brainstorming session. Our team is going to come up with a proposal for you of how we can solve your problem. And so if it's all right, I'd like to come back next week with our proposal on how to solve your corporate problems relating to, our consulting work. And it was very successful too. So, okay, well, sorry I'm holding you over, but you can look, this idea of seek first, understand, then be understood is very important. It's important for families. It's important for business. And I know from my own background, from my own experiences, that it can make you successful without being, by the way, doing what I was doing. That did not require me to be a hard-nosed salesman. I'm not a good salesman, but I was a good strategist. And so once I figured out the strategy, now it was not a hard sell anymore. I could come sell them a campaign. They could understand that very quickly, and they were anxious to let me help them improve their sales. And so I was not a good salesman, but I was a good consultant, basically. I became a consultant. Okay, thank you.
Good afternoon to Professor Ken and all of you. So, I am Brenny, and this is my teammate.
I'm Feng Jianyuan. I'm Song Yi. I'm Rosen.
So, before we begin our presentations, I have questions, which is: have you all ever think about your inner and deepest voice? So, well, in today's society, all of us has been busy to work or studies that we don't have the time to settle down to think about our thoughts and what we are and the true self of us. So today we are going to discuss about think about your thoughts. At the end of these presentations, we hope that all of you will be able to understand the thinking skills, how the types of thinking skills, the importance of thinking skills, and to apply it in our daily life to solve problems and making decisions. There are two common stages that we will gone through in our life, which are high school stage and college stage. High school stage is the previous stage of thinking. In high school, which is based on the facts or information provided, and we will answer the questions using the context or facts in our textbook or class. And the thinking in high school is considered very tight and structured, which we will just base on those information that we learned in the class. For college stage, we will start to have our own thinking, and we will access and evaluate news, approaches, and ideas based on our own thinking. We will be able to use variety of thinking skills and higher order thinking skills. And now I pass to Ming Feng to continue.
Alright, so I will be introducing to you guys about Bloom's taxonomy. So, what is Bloom's taxonomy? Before that, let us jump back into the histories. In 1950s, a person named Benjamin Bloom has developed classifications of thinking skills. There are actually 6 types of thinking skills, which are remember, understand, apply, analyze, evaluate, and create. It is ranked in the order of complexity and based on the knowledge, comprehensions, applications, synthesis, evaluations, and also analyzing. Now, let us jump into the first one, remembering and recalling skills. It involves retrieving or repeating information or ideas based on your memories. It is the first and the most basic thinking skills that you will develop. It all started when we learned about numbers, letters, and colors. When our mom started to teach us how to count, we tend to remember the order instead of understanding it. The second is understanding. It is interpreting, constructing meanings, and inferring or explaining materials in the form of either written, spoken, or graphic sources. The most common example used is through reading. Through reading, we can understand the things even more. Then the third is applying. Using or implement the learned materials or concepts into a new situation in new situations. It is when we start to use our knowledge and apply it in our daily life. And this skills is commonly used in the middle school. And the fourth is analyzing. It is the breaking of concepts into key elements, which will help us to determine how the parts are related to each another. This will help us to see the overall structure and to view it in a bigger picture in order for us to get the purpose of it. The skills needed are examining, contrasting, separating, categorizing, examining, and also deducing. These analyzing skills are required in most of the science-related subjects, where we need to do our own experiments, collect the data, and then analyze the data. In order for us to deduce a very logical conclusion, analyzing skills are needed. The fifth is evaluating skills. Assessing, making judgments, drawing conclusions, either from ideas, information, or data. In this stage, we will start to critique, question, and evaluate the value and usefulness of the data, of the concept to us. It encompasses most of what we refer to as critical thinking. And it is also the first focus of this chapter, which is to think critically. And the last one is creating. It is where we're putting the parts and reorganizing the ideas into a new way, a form, and also a product. Creating is one of the most difficult mental functions, and which is also the most useful for us to solve the problem. In this world, what we need is a creative and critical thinker. This comes to our second focus of this chapter, which is to think creatively. Next, I'll pass my time to Xiamen.
Thank you, Mingo. So forward to why critical thinking is important.
Critical thinking is a foundation of effective communication. It is the principal skill used in effective decisions making and is the core of creating a new knowledge and is a way to uncover bias and prejudice. So, in the communication process, the sender have a thought, then it encodes in message and select the path or method to deliver in message, and the receiver will decode it and receive the message. So this process contains noise, internal filter, and external filter by the receiver, which will manipulate the message sent by the sender. So the sender has to think critically in order to allow the message sent and get the feedback they want without any manipulation or effect on the meaning of the message. So we'll enhance the communication process. Next, critical thinking in the decisions making process. So first, we have a problem, then we have to think critically in the identification of the problem, think about the solution, exploration to the alternative or deeply about the problem, taking action on it, and evaluate on the action that is taken. So by going through the process, you have a better decision making. Next, how critical thinking creates a new knowledge. It's about asking WH questions about who, what, where, when, and how. Anytime, anywhere, if you're asking this kind of WH question, you are going to going deeper about the detail of an event, or even new knowledge will be created by asking questions. So critical thinking process is all about asking the right questions to understand a problem or issue, then gathering of data. So critical thinking process, first, think about what is the problem by understanding the questions of the problem and think about what are my options. So I'm now giving a scenario that you have difficulties in walking to the school or going to class. You gotta walk through in the hot sun and you're tired and spending a lot of time, so you're going to buy a car. So what is your criterion about? You are a student right now, so you have a most considered is about the price, then you give a weightage of 10, and then about the handling, due to you didn't drive for a long run, so you give a weightage of 1. So it's about in decreasing way. And next, we're going to think about what is the option that you have, what are the car brand or model available in the market. So and how good is your information collected about those cars that you selected. So after collecting enough information, you're going to the test drive or somehow getting enhancing your information collected, and you settle a new table, which, for example, okay, in this first car, Jeep Corpus, if it is very expensive, then you choose the initial price, you give a max of 2, then times with the weightage of 10, which is set just now previous slide, then you get a 20 marks at the price here, then you sum up with all the criterion and the weightage you provided and get a total. This method will allow you to uncover the bias and prejudice and the inside voice of your mind that allows you to make a better decisions making. So finally, the fourth focus is my choice due to it has a better score in overall. So I will pass to Wailam to continue about the fallacies.
Is fallacies actually about? Fallacies are defects in the logic that weaken our arguments. Have you aware that sometimes your friends, parents, or anyone else doesn't really believe or convinced by the reason that you give to them? If does, it means that we are already applying these policies in our arguments. So there are total 7 types of policies. First one is generalizations, false cause, personalization, weak analogy, appealing to authority, everyone does it, and also false dichotomy. And now I will explain it one by one to all of you. First, generalization. It is making assumption about a whole group of people just based on an inadequate sample. Just like the picture shown here, it concludes that 2 is equal to 1, and by giving a reason that 2 and 1 is a number, it tends to generalize all the reasons just by one reason together to prove the argument. Generalization also everywhere in our daily life. For example, prejudice, stereotype. Like sometimes we tend to say that Malays are lazy, engineers are nerds. All these kind are generalizations. Second, false cause. By drawing improper conclusion through sequencing, like if comes before B, then we tend to conclude that A causes B. For example, President A raised tax, and then the rate of violent crime increased. And we conclude that President A is responsible for the rise in crime. But in fact, the increase of tax might or might be one of the factors in the rising crime rates. So to avoid this kind of fallacies in our argument, we have to give a very clear explanation on how actually event A causes event B. Next, personalization. This fallacy is by inserting personalities inappropriately into an argument. Like right now, we are going to choose a club president in this class, and somebody suddenly raise up a hand and say, I deny this person to be our president because his or her parent is a prisoner. And this obviously shows that the people who are denying that person is personal attacking those particular person as her reason to become a president. Next, everyone does this. Is that we try to justify an issue based solely on the number of people involved. Just like when your mother is asking about why are you always playing PUBG, Mobile Legend, whole day, and you just say, just because my friends do so and play so do I. Next, appealing to authority is by using an endorsement from someone as a primary reason for supporting a point of view. Just like the picture shown here, the student is trying to ask a lab head, why should we adding this kind of solution in the experiment? And the lab head just reply the student by saying that just because I'm the lab head, you need to follow what I say. So to avoid of this kind of policies, we can try to not instead of saying because of Dr. X says so we need to believe it. We can try to find out the reason, the evidence behind the reason that said by the professor. The sixth fallacies are vague analogy. It's which by using irrelevant similarities in two objects to draw a conclusions. Like now I'm making an argument which it is not necessary for a motorcycle rider to wear helmet on the highway road. And the reason that I give is that because car drivers do not wear helmet, so motorcycle rider also no need to wear the helmet. But in fact, these two properties, car and motorcycle, have different properties. We can't compare them in this kind of way. So to avoid this, we have to find out the similar properties between the car and motorcycle in order to give a stronger reason for them to believe on our argument. Lastly, it's about a false dichotomy. It's whereby a person tries to set up a situation in which it looks like there are only two possible options. Like, you need to go to the party with me, otherwise you will just bored at home. That the only possibility besides being at home is being bored at home. That's the only possibility besides being at party is being bored at home. But it is not true, right? We can have entertainment in home rather than just bored at home. So after you have a clear idea about the 7 types of fallacies, so how can we avoid it? What the tips that can improve our critical thinking? First is by consider all point of views. Like in this world, they are not just black and white. There are a shade of gray in between these two colors. We can try to think more options, ways to convince people to make our argument stronger. And the second one is by keeping an open mind. We can accept new concept, knowledge, suggestions from other people's. Third one is by look for evidence that contradicts your points of view. And lastly is by evaluate the strength of information that are used to support argument. So that's all from me, and I will now pass to Arnott to continue.
Okay, so in this current social, the ability to imagine and generate new ideas with speed and to implement them through global collaboration is the most important competitive advantage. Creativity is creativity is an inherited skill. It's actually a myth. So creativity is not something that people born with. It is a skill that is developed over the time with consistent practice. Other than that, there's another myth about creativity is that creativity is a free-form thinking. While you may want to free yourself from all preconceived notions, there's a recognizable structure to creative thinking. Rules and regulations do not limit creative thinking. So I will talk about the tips for creative thinking. So for the first one, feed your curiosity. Creative people makes a habit of gathering informations because they never know that when they might put it in good use. Creativity is often as much about rearranging known ideas as it is about creating a completely new concept. The more known ideas you have been exposed to, the more options you have for combining them into new concepts. For the second one, which is develop your flexibility. So develop your flexibility by looking for a second right answer. Throughout school, we have been conditioned to come up with the right answer. However, the reality is that there is often more than one right answer. So we should examine all the possibilities. For the third one, we'll be combine old ideas in new ways. So combine old ideas in new ways is like ask yourself questions be like, what is the most ridiculous solution I can come up for this problem? Or if I were transported by a time machine back to 1930s, how would I solve this problem? When King Cgi registered his patent for the safety razor, he built on the idea of disposable bottle cap, but his venture didn't become profitable until he toyed with a watch spring and came up with the idea and how to manufacture an expensive razor. And the fourth one will be think metaphorically. So metaphors are useful to describe complex ideas. They are also useful in making problems more familiar and in stimulating possible solutions. So, for example, if you were a partner in a company and about to take on outside investors, you might use the pie metaphor to clarify your options. For the last tips, we'll be asking. So, a creative thinker always questions the ways the things are. Why are we doing the things this way? What were the objective of this process and assumptions made? Are they still valid? We need to change the process and how? So we should get in the habit of asking a lot of questions. And there's another tips for problem solving and decision making. For the first one, we define the problem, narrow the problem, generate possible solution, and also choose the best solution. So I will pass my part to my teammate.
So change your thoughts and you will change your world, from Norman Vincent Peirce. So after all my friends talk about thoughts that can affect us in our academic ways, so now we will talk about thoughts that will affect our life. This is because our action is the manufacturing of our thoughts. So I will teach you steps to allow you to have a better thoughts, to have a better life. So first of all, change your thoughts by creating a positive affirmation. Affirmation is not necessarily positive in our life. For example, the hexes that created by the witches are negative affirmation. So like we'll never stop cursing ourselves that tomorrow is the deadline of the assignment. Why should I not do it early? I cannot do it. I cannot do it. I don't have the time. And that is what we know as negative affirmation. But then instead, you should change your affirmation to a more positive one, which is, I can do it. I'm gonna do it and I will do it. And that's how you change your change your negative affirmation to a positive affirmation. And positive affirmation is like a mantra. They have scars and spiritual force behind it. And just to take notes that positive affirmation should not be normative and weak. For example, the video that gave by Professor Ken from Will Smith Believe. His positive affirmation is very good, which is he is willing to die for the things that he wanted to and what he believed to, and that's how they drive them to his success. Next is to learn to apply a full stop. So this full stop is like the same full stop from the sentence that we use to stop an sentence. So we never stop cursing ourselves like, I should have done better. Like for example, in my SPM, I cannot get a good result to allow me to go to matrix. So that time I keep cursing myself. why should not I study better and help my parents to reduce my burden? But then when I stopped my cursing, when I stopped mumbling all for the problems that I face, I learned to move on by stopping myself from cursing myself. And this is the same from the Lisa Kundrum Find Your Reason, which she feel happy that she was fired by his company because the events that happened after uh, the company fires her is what makes her now who she is now. Next is to change your thoughts by counting your joys and blessing. Most of us will forget our joys and blessing when we are keep on complaining all the things that we don't have. Well, if you keep on complaining the things that you don't have, why don't you think about Nick Vujicic, which Born Without Limbs, the Australian motivator. He can be considered as one of the happiest guys in this world, which he appreciate every joys and blessing that he got from his friend and become a motivator to motivate other people who is in depressions. So the quote that I like from him the most is, if you don't have your miracle yourself, be a miracle to other people. That is why his career is to motivate other people. Next is to appreciate and enjoy what you already have. From Logan, he said that there's two things to aim in life. The first is to get what you want, and after that to enjoy it. Only the wisest of mankind has achieved the second. So it's normal to have a higher benchmark and highest goal, but with a higher benchmark and a higher goal, the failure rate will be increasing. So, for example, if you aim to be the first in your class, and you end up in the result you get only third and the fifth, and you should not be sad about it. You should be proud about it because you enjoy the process where you suffer, where you giving all your stress to studies and learn the new things that happens, and that's your result, and you should enjoy your results. Next is to stand erect and hold your heads high up in trying circumference. Well, in trying circumference means that circumference where you are not in the favorable condition. So we'll feel that our weight is being pressed down by others people by an unknown force. But then you should try and lift up your spirits and accept the challenge given by you. And that's how can you overcome the depression when you are in an unfavorable condition. And try it, you will have the result. Next is to allow yourself to be playful and childlike. So children are generalized as innocence and simplicity. So even if they have quarrel with their friends, and tomorrow you will see them happily playing with each other again. So if you translate it to be adult ways of saying is that we should be able to forget and forgive other people. So that because having gouge with each other is very tiresome, right? And then next is to seek happiness and contentment in the present. So let me ask you a question. Does anyone believe that if you suffer now and in the future you'll be happy? Hello? Okay, you guys believe, right? That's a wrong concept. Well, why is it? So it's not that I want to curse you, but future is something that is very unsure. And you might not actually live to tomorrow, and some accidents might happen. So I've touched wood. It's not that I want to curse you. I strengthen it again to say I'm not cursing you. It says that the unsure future, you should not put all your bet on it. Instead, you should focusing on your happiness at the present, which you can actually feel the happiness. So I will pass my time to Renee.
So now I will continue for the following points, which is meditate daily. By meditating, we will be able to lower our metabolisms and our heart rate, and we will be able to think about our thoughts peacefully. Focus on changing yourself instead of changing the world around you. When we are unable to change the circumstances around us, we should try to change ourselves to adapt to the situations. Make the best of what you have. Imperfections is what we all are worried of, and we are scared of people's point of view about us. Well, but we should know that in the imperfections, there are some perfections in it. And